This is Kalmia by Willard Metcalf. It's a painting that was done in 1905, and the name of the painting comes from the Latin term for mountain laurel, Kalmia latifolia. It's a painting that's important because it represents Willard Metcalf's transition from an earlier style of art that he picked up in France. He went to Giverny and was actually friendly with Claude Monet, and he spent several years there off and on in the 1880s before returning to America in 1888. And it takes a long time for Metcalf to make the transition from a kind of softly applied paint, the sort of richly toned color palette that he used in France, and to really kind of assimilate the example of Monet's version of Impressionism. And in fact, it takes Metcalf almost 20 years to do that. So he was feeling a kind of crisis in his career by the early 1900s. He talked about how he was suffering nervous anxiety in the city and needed to go to the country to paint. And he ends up at the art colony in Old Lyme, which is where he painted this picture, right on the Lieutenant River behind the boarding house where he stayed. This was a crucial moment for Metcalf. It's a period he referred to as his Renaissance, when he throws off what was impeding him and holding him back and embraces Impressionism. And in this picture, that transition is made quite apparent in the way that the background and the foreground relate to one another. The background is painted in soft greens and blues and purple tones, which is very reminiscent of works that Metcalf did in France with these very softly blended and applied colors. And there's a bit of a tension or contrast in this work with the bushes of Kalmia that are growing along the banks of the river here. This is where you see the Impressionist coming out of Willard Metcalf, exploding forth in a kind of impasto that he uses, laying paint on thick and unmodified dabs to create this burst of flowers. It's significant that he chose Kalmia as the means for making this transition because it was a flower that had a lot of significance in early 20th century American culture. It was a native species. Old Lyme was an area known for having bounteous groves of mountain laurel that bloomed each year in late June. And it's a flower that was really embraced by the American Impressionist and embraced in American culture because it was seen as embodying American traits, that it was native to the soil, it was hardy, its wood was very hard, it was evergreen, and it was spoken of as really kind of exemplifying traits that Americans applied to themselves. It's analogized to being as enduring as liberty itself in some of the periodicals of the time. The patriotic spirit with which the plant was viewed, associating it with kind of liberty and kind of claiming this identity is cemented in 1907, a couple of years after this picture is painted, when the flower is named Connecticut's state flower, after a group of women who were part of the garden movement mobilized thousands of votes in favor of Kalmia as that flower.